She moved through her days quietly, almost like she was trying not to take up space. At school, she sat near the back of the classroom, listening more than she spoke. At home, she helped her mother, did her work, and stayed inside. People often mistook her silence for weakness, but it was really just her way of surviving in a place that never felt safe. The building where she lived was tall and old, with long hallways that echoed every footstep. From the outside, it looked like any other apartment tower. Inside, it was full of lives stacked on top of each other, all carrying their own stories. Some neighbors smiled and said hello. Others looked away. Everyone was busy, and that busyness often turned into silence. At school, a small group of aggressors had noticed her early on. They saw how she kept her head down, how she didn't fight back with words, how she avoided attention. First, it was small things. Laughing when she walked past, whispering jokes just loud enough for her to hear, blocking her path in the hallway and pretending it was an accident. None of it seemed serious enough for teachers to step in, and that made the aggressors feel bold. She tried to ignore it. Every morning, she told herself to focus on her classes, on getting through the day, on the future she dreamed of. She believed that if she stayed calm and quiet, the trouble would pass. But it didn't. The more she stayed silent, the more the aggressors tested how far they could go. At home, her mother noticed the change. The girl spoke even less than before. She ate quickly and went to her room. When asked about school, she said everything was fine. She didn't want to worry anyone. Her mother already worked long hours, and money was always tight. The girl felt it was her job to be strong. The apartment building had a balcony on the upper floors that many residents used to get fresh air. It was shared space, not well monitored, and often ignored by security. People stood there to talk, to smoke, or to look down at the city lights. It should have been a peaceful place, but it slowly became another spot where the aggressors felt free to act. They started crossing paths with her there after school. First, it was words again. Teasing, mocking, questions meant to make her feel small. She stayed near the wall, eyes lowered, waiting for them to leave. Sometimes other residents were nearby, but no one said anything. Some people glanced over and then looked away, not wanting to get involved. Each encounter left her feeling smaller, like the world was closing in. Still, she told herself it was temporary. She counted the days, the weeks, reminding herself that life was bigger than this moment. She focused on her studies and the hope that one day she would leave that building and that school behind. The aggressors, however, were growing careless. They laughed louder. They blocked her more openly. They joked about how no one ever stopped them. Their confidence came from the silence around them. Silence from classmates. Silence from neighbors. Silence from adults who didn't want trouble. One afternoon, the tension felt heavier than usual. The sky was gray, and the air was thick. School had been hard that day. She had struggled to focus, feeling watched even when she wasn't. When she returned to the building, she hoped to slip inside unnoticed. Instead, she ran into the same group again near the elevator. They followed her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to be felt. She could hear their footsteps, their low voices, their laughter. Her heart beat faster, but she kept walking, pretending nothing was wrong. She stepped out onto the balcony area, hoping the open space would make them lose interest. Didn't. They surrounded her with words first, talking over each other, teasing, daring, pushing boundaries without laying a hand on her. She stood still, gripping the strap of her bag, breathing slowly like she had taught herself to do. She looked for help, for someone to notice, but the space felt empty. In that moment, she felt the weight of every time she had stayed silent. Not because she regretted it, but because she realized silence had not protected her. It had only taught others that she was alone. Somewhere below, traffic moved as usual. Life continued, unaware of what was happening above. That contrast made everything feel unreal, like she was standing on the edge of two different worlds. She thought of her mother. She thought of the future she wanted. She reminded herself that she deserved to be safe, that this wasn't right. Even though fear pressed against her chest, A small part of her refused to break. The aggressors joked, unaware of how serious the moment was becoming. They didn't think about consequences. They didn't think about cameras or witnesses or the fact that actions could not always be taken back. They only thought about power and control. What none of them noticed was that not everyone in the building was distant or distracted. Not everyone believed in looking away. Somewhere nearby, someone had seen enough. The girl stood there, quiet but unbroken, as the situation edged closer to a moment that would change everything. She didn't know it yet, but the silence around her was about to end. This was only the beginning. The moment stretched longer than it should have. The air felt tight, and even the smallest sound seemed louder than usual. She stayed still, hoping the situation would lose energy on its own, hoping someone would step in, hoping this was just another scare that would pass. But the group did not move away. Instead, they fed off each other's presence, growing louder and more careless. They spoke over one another, tossing words back and forth like a game. Each laugh felt sharper than the last. She kept her eyes low, focusing on the ground, reminding herself to breathe. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced them to stay by her sides. She had learned that showing fear only made things worse. Someone stepped closer. Not touching, just close enough to invade her space. She took a small step back without thinking, her heel brushing the edge behind her. That's when she realized how close she was to the railing. Her heart jumped, and she froze. The aggressors noticed her hesitation. They exchanged looks, amused by the sudden shift. One of them joked about how dramatic she was being. Another laughed and said she should relax. None of them seemed to understand how serious the situation was becoming. Or maybe they did and simply didn't care. She spoke then, quietly, asking them to stop. Her voice shook, but the words were clear. It was the first time she had asked them directly. For a brief second, there was silence. Then the laughter returned, louder than before. That brief moment of speaking up changed the tone. What had started as words now felt unstable, like something tipping over. They moved around her, blocking her path back inside. She looked toward the door, then back at the railing, calculating her options. Neither felt safe. Time seemed to slow. The city noise below drifted upward, mixing with voices and footsteps. Her thoughts raced, jumping between fear and determination. She reminded herself again that she deserved to go home safely, that this was wrong, that this should not be happening. Someone bumped into her shoulder. It wasn't hard, but it was enough to throw her balance off for a second. She grabbed the railing instinctively, steadying herself. Her breathing became shallow. She could feel her pulse in her ears. That was when the mood shifted from teasing to danger. The group's laughter faded into uneasy silence as they realized how close things were getting to something serious. Instead of stepping back, they acted without thinking. Movements became rushed. Voices overlapped. The situation spun out of control in a matter of seconds. She stumbled, losing her grip, and the world tilted. There was shouting, sudden panic, and the sound of footsteps scraping against concrete. She tried to catch herself, reaching for anything solid. Her mind focused only on staying upright. The next moments were chaos. People inside the building heard raised voices and rushed toward the sound. Someone screamed. Another person shouted for help. Doors opened. The aggressors stepped back, their faces changing as reality hit them all at once. She lay still, stunned, surrounded by noise she could barely process. Her body ached, but she was conscious, aware of the cold surface beneath her and the frantic movement around her. Her vision blurred as people leaned over her, asking if she could hear them. Someone called emergency services. Another person tried to keep her calm, telling her not to move. She focused on the voice, clinging to it like an anchor. Her fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Shock, confusion, and disbelief. The aggressors stood apart, no longer laughing. Their confidence had disappeared. They whispered to each other, glancing around, realizing how many eyes were now on them. For the first time, they looked afraid. Sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The sound cut through the air, sharp and unavoidable. People gathered, forming a loose circle, some filming, some praying, some just staring. She thought of her mother again. She wondered if she would be angry, scared, or heartbroken. She hoped someone would tell her gently. She hoped she would understand that she tried to be brave. Emergency responders arrived quickly, moving with practiced calm. They spoke softly, asking simple questions, checking her condition. She answered when she could, her voice barely above a whisper. Hands worked carefully around her, securing support, offering reassurance. As she was lifted and taken away, she caught one last glimpse of the balcony. The place that should have been safe. The place where silence had nearly cost her everything. The aggressors were questioned on the spot. Their stories didn't match. Their words tangled as they tried to explain what had happened. Witnesses stepped forward, some shaking, some angry, all aware that ignoring things had gone too far. News spread quickly through the building and the surrounding area. By nightfall, people were talking about it everywhere. Some expressed regret for not stepping in sooner. Others demanded answers. The quiet tower no longer felt invisible. In a hospital room filled with soft beeping sounds and bright lights, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her body hurt, but her mind hurt more. She replayed the moments over and over, wondering how things had escalated so quickly. A nurse adjusted a blanket and spoke kindly to her, reminding her that she was safe now. Safe was a word she wasn't sure she believed yet, but hearing it helped. What she didn't know was that the story had already reached someone unexpected. Someone who understood danger, recognized injustice, and did not believe in looking away. The ripple had begun, and the silence that once protected the wrong people was finally breaking. The hospital room felt quiet in a strange way. Machines hummed softly, and lights from the hallway slipped in through the door. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound. Her body was sore, but the pain came and went in waves. What stayed constant was the weight in her chest, the feeling that something in her life had shifted forever. Doctors and nurses came in and out, asking gentle questions and explaining things slowly. They told her she was lucky. They said it could have been much worse. She nodded, though the words felt distant. Lucky didn't feel like the right word, but she understood what they meant. Her mother arrived not long after. Her face showed fear first, then relief, then a quiet strength as she held her daughter's hand. No words were needed at first. The grip alone said everything. The girl closed her eyes, letting herself rest for the first time since it happened. Outside the hospital, the story continued to grow. People from the building talked. Some shared what they had seen. Others shared what they wished they had done differently. A few admitted they had noticed problems before but never thought it would go this far. Regret filled many conversations. Security footage was reviewed. Phone videos surfaced. The picture became clearer with every hour. What once felt invisible was now impossible to ignore. Not far from the hospital, a man sat on a motorcycle, listening to a call on his phone. He was older, calm, and used to situations where things went wrong fast. He had spent years riding roads most people avoided and stepping into moments others ran from. When he heard what had happened, his jaw tightened. He didn't know the girl personally. He didn't need to. The details were enough. A young person hurt. A group acting without consequences. Too many people choosing silence. It was a story he had heard in different forms before. He rode toward the building later that evening, not looking for trouble, just answers. The engine's sound echoed through the street as he parked nearby. People noticed him right away. His presence carried weight without him saying a word. He spoke to residents calmly, asking what they had seen. Some were nervous at first. Others were eager to talk. Stories overlapped, filling in gaps. He listened more than he spoke, nodding, taking mental notes. He had learned long ago that truth often came out when people felt heard. At the building entrance, police officers were still present, collecting statements. The man didn't interfere. He stood back, observing. He recognized the signs of shaken confidence in the aggressor's behavior. The loudness was gone. The certainty was gone. Reality had replaced it. Later, he met with someone who knew the girl's family. He made it clear he wasn't there to scare anyone or take matters into his own hands. He wanted accountability. He wanted the truth protected, not buried. At the hospital, the girl woke to quiet voices and the soft glow of morning light. A nurse smiled and told her she was doing well. Her mother sat nearby, eyes tired but steady. They talked in low voices about school, about recovery, about taking things one day at a time. The girl asked about the people involved. Her mother hesitated, then answered honestly. There were investigations. There were statements. Nothing was finished yet. Hearing that brought both fear and relief. At least it wasn't being ignored. Word reached the hospital that someone had been asking questions at the building. Not a reporter. Not an official. Someone else. Someone who had seen things like this before and refused to let them fade away. The girl didn't know what to think. Part of her wanted to disappear, to rest, to forget. Another part felt something new rising beneath the fear. A small sense that maybe she wasn't as alone as she had believed. As days passed, her condition improved. Bruises faded slowly. Strength returned bit by bit. Visitors came with quiet encouragement and apologies. Some said they wished they had stepped in sooner. She listened, not sure how to respond. Forgiveness was complicated. Meanwhile, pressure grew outside. Community members demanded updates. Authorities reviewed evidence more closely. What had once been brushed aside as minor trouble was now seen for what it was. The man on the motorcycle stayed in the background, making calls, sharing information, ensuring witnesses felt supported. He didn't seek attention. He didn't need credit. For him, this was about balance. About making sure power didn't go unchecked. One evening, he stood outside the hospital for a moment, helmet in hand. He didn't go in. He didn't want to overwhelm her or her family. Instead, he left a message through someone they trusted. A simple one. She mattered. What happened was not her fault. And she was not alone. When the girl heard the message, something inside her shifted. It didn't erase the fear or the pain, but it added weight to a new feeling, hope. For the first time since the incident, she slept without replaying every moment in her mind. Outside, the city kept moving. But beneath the noise and lights, change was beginning. Quiet at first, then steady. The story was no longer just about what happened on a balcony. It was becoming about what happened next. Recovery was not a straight line. Some days she woke up feeling strong, ready to move forward. Other days, the memories came back without warning. A sound in the hallway, laughter outside a window, the feeling of being watched. Each moment reminded her that healing took time. She returned home slowly, supported by her mother and a few close relatives. The apartment felt different now. Familiar but heavier. The balcony doors stayed closed. She preferred to sit by the window instead, where she could see the street below and remind herself that life was still moving. School administrators contacted the family. Meetings were scheduled. Words like review, procedure, and investigation filled the conversations. She listened quietly while adults spoke around her. This time, though, the tone had changed. People were careful. People were paying attention. Witnesses came forward in greater numbers. Some shared stories of earlier moments they had brushed aside. Others admitted they had seen warning signs but didn't know how to step in. Their voices carried regret, but also responsibility. It mattered that they spoke now. The aggressors were no longer confident. Their presence shrank. They avoided eye contact. They spoke less. When questioned, their answers shifted and changed. The truth had weight, and it pressed down on them. Authorities reviewed footage and statements carefully. Every detail mattered. The timeline became clear. The pattern became impossible to deny. What once looked like isolated behavior was now understood as something repeated and ignored for too long. The man on the motorcycle stayed steady through it all. He didn't speak loudly or make threats. He helped connect people who were afraid to talk with those who could protect them. He reminded witnesses they were not alone. His calm presence gave others the courage they thought they lacked. He checked in quietly with the family through trusted channels. Never demanding updates. Never pushing. just making sure support was there if it was needed. That respect meant more than grand gestures ever could. As days turned into weeks, the story reached beyond the building. Community meetings were held. People spoke about safety, about silence, about what it meant to look away. Some conversations were uncomfortable. Others were long overdue. The girl attended one meeting, sitting beside her mother. She didn't speak, but she listened. Hearing adults acknowledge what had happened felt strange but validating. It told her that her experience mattered. Therapy sessions began soon after. First, she barely talked. The counselor didn't rush her. They focused on breathing, grounding, and small steps. Slowly, words came. Fear, anger, confusion, strength. Naming those feelings gave her control she hadn't felt before. The school changes were made. Staff presence increased in shared spaces. Reporting systems were explained clearly. Students were encouraged to speak up, not just for themselves, but for others. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Some classmates approached her with apologies. Others offered quiet smiles. She accepted what felt sincere and let go of the rest. Healing didn't mean pleasing everyone. It meant protecting her peace. The aggressors faced consequences. Restrictions were placed. Actions were taken. The details were handled by authorities. But the message was clear. What happened was serious, and it would not be ignored. The man on the motorcycle attended one final meeting with community leaders. He spoke briefly. He said moments like this were not about one person being brave, but about many people choosing not to stay silent. He reminded them that real change happened when ordinary people took responsibility. Then he stepped back again as he always did. For the girl, something had shifted. The fear still existed, but it no longer controlled every thought. She walked a little taller. She spoke a little more. She learned that strength did not always mean fighting back. Sometimes it meant surviving and continuing. One afternoon, she returned to the balcony with her mother. The door opened slowly. The air was cool. The city stretched out below them. She stood near the wall, steady and grounded. She didn't stay long, but she stayed long enough. That moment mattered. It marked the point where the past loosened its grip. The story was no longer just about harm. It was about accountability, and about a young person reclaiming her space in the world. Time passed in quiet, steady ways. Not the kind that erased what happened, but the kind that softened sharp edges. Days turned into routines again. Mornings had light. Evenings had calm. The girl learned how to live with the memory without letting it decide who she was. She returned to school fully after a while. Walking through the halls felt strange at first, like stepping into a place that remembered her pain. But she kept going. Each step mattered. Teachers greeted her with care. Some classmates nodded in respect. Others simply gave space. She appreciated both. Her focus slowly returned to learning. Books became familiar again. Notes filled pages. She discovered that concentration came in waves, and that was okay. When her mind wandered, she brought it back gently. She no longer punished herself for needing time. At home, evenings were warmer. Her mother cooked favorite meals more often. They talked more openly than before. Sometimes about the future. Sometimes about nothing important at all. Laughter returned, not forced, just natural. The building changed too. New lighting was installed. Security routines improved. Neighbors spoke more often. The silence that once filled the hallways was replaced with small acknowledgments, simple greetings, and watchful care. People remembered what had happened, not with gossip but with awareness. They understood now that ignoring warning signs had real costs. That understanding lingered. The legal process moved forward quietly. There were meetings, decisions, and outcomes handled by the system. The details stayed private, but the message was clear. Actions had consequences. Responsibility mattered. The girl was not asked to be a symbol or a voice unless she wanted to be. That choice mattered most of all. Sometimes she spoke in small ways. Other times she stayed silent by choice, this time not fear. Therapy continued. Conversations deepened. She learned how to recognize fear when it arrived and how to let it pass without control. She learned that strength was not loud. It was patient. It was steady. One afternoon, she sat outside with a notebook, writing thoughts that came and went. Not everything made sense yet, but she didn't need it to. Writing helped her see how far she had come. The man on the motorcycle passed through the area less often now. His role was finished. Balance had been restored enough for him to step away. He never asked for thanks. He never expected recognition. Before leaving for good, he sent one final message through someone trusted. It was simple. Keep choosing courage. Even when it's quiet. The girl kept those words close. As seasons changed, she noticed new things about herself. She spoke up sooner. She trusted her instincts. She checked in on others who seemed withdrawn. Not because she had to, but because she understood. One day at school, she saw someone being teased in a small way. Nothing dramatic, just enough to hurt. She paused, then stepped forward calmly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She simply interrupted the moment. That small action mattered. She realized then that her story was no longer defined by what others had done to her. It was shaped by what she chose next. Graduation day arrived sooner than expected. She stood in line wearing a simple outfit, heart steady. Her mother watched from the crowd, eyes shining. When her name was called, she walked across the stage with confidence she had earned. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real. It belonged to her. Later that evening, they returned home together. The city lights flickered on below the balcony. She stepped outside briefly, breathing in the night air. No fear, just awareness, just presence. She thought about the past, not with anger, but with understanding. What happened had been wrong. It had been unfair. But it had also revealed something important. She was stronger than she had ever believed. And she was not alone. Life continued, imperfect and unpredictable. But she moved forward with her head high, carrying lessons instead of wounds. The story that once began in silence ended with choice. Choice to live fully. Choice to be seen. Choice to keep going. And that was enough.